Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will get started in just a moment. Good morning, everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we will go ahead and get started. See here. Can everybody see my screen? If you could just drop it in the chat if you can. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. We want to quickly run through just some slides and then really want to take this opportunity mainly for question and answer. We are hoping that we're going to get volume one approval soon from NTIA. And so what we would like to do is quickly go over the BEAD program, the challenge process, and answer any questions that you may have related to the program. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Um, so generally talking about just, what is the BEAD program? So essentially looking at, and just to confirm, are y'all able to see my slides versus just the cover page? I apologize. I'm seeing a couple of different things on my screens.
I can see it on my end. I think, sorry guys, this is Sarah Vasca.
Mhm.
Uh,
Can you also
I,
enable the chat? Because they're saying the chat is disabled.
yep.
Thank you. Perfect. Give me just 1 second. I apologize for our technical difficulties. Usually we use Teams. Just 1 second. It's not going to be as pretty. We're just not going to use presentation mode, but that way everybody can go ahead and make sure that we do see the slides. So just so we've got an overview of the BEAD program. So as many know, so the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also the IIJA, created the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is the BEAD program. So what that is it's just under $42.5 billion to expand high-speed internet throughout the country. And that's going to all 50 states and territories. It's a minimum that each state receives $100 million. However, back in June of 2023, each of the states found out their allotment, and Georgia's is just over $1.3 billion. So very significant funding for the program. We have already applied for and been granted just shy of $5 million in planning funds for the program. And with that, we've been using that funding to create the deliverables that we'll talk about in a moment, that were kind of the precursors to being able to start the implementation of the program, which we're hopefully going to start very soon here once we get approval of our volume 1. So with that, talking about kind of the kind of overview of the program and each of our deliverables. So again, the funding allotment was announced back in June. So we now thankfully finally know how much we're receiving. And then with that, these funds are based on a tiered structure supposed to be used first for three different items, and then obviously there's some non-deployment uses if we have any remaining funding. First, we have to use this funding to get to unserved locations. So any locations that remain in the state of Georgia that are unserved, that do not have a funding commitment to serve them at the 100 by 20 level, so 100 megabits in the download and 20 in the upload, then we need to find service for those locations. So anything that is currently considered unserved is anything that doesn't have 25 by 3. So 25 megabits in the download and 3 in the upload. And then we're also looking at underserved locations. So an underserved are defined as kind of that delta of they have 25 by 3, but they don't have 100 by 20. And so our goal is that we're looking at any location in this program that does not have that cannot meet that current speed threshold, or does not have a funding commitment to get to that 100 by 20 threshold currently in the state of Georgia. There's also a third category that we're looking at as well, which is community anchor institutions, and specifically community anchor institutions that promote the use of broadband and connectivity in the communities that they serve. So with that, essentially the state of Georgia is receiving another set of resources to add on to the work that Governor Kemp has already done through the American Rescue Plan Act, using both State Fiscal Recovery Fund money and then also Capital Projects Fund money to currently fund over $660 million in projects that are currently in flight. And then this will be the kind of remaining large push to make sure that we get funding commitments to all of our remaining unserved, unfunded locations in the state of Georgia, and also underserved locations, and then as far as we can go into community anchor institutions. Based on our cost modeling that was completed last year, we believe that we do have enough funding to get to all of our unserved locations. And most, if not all, of our underserved locations. It just ultimately depends on the bids that are received, and then obviously the associated matching funds from the applicants. And then we do ultimately feel like that we will obligate all of the funding either right at the end of getting to all of the underserved, or also as we get into our community anchor institutions. However, if we are able to serve all of those locations, then there are some non-deployment uses for the funding focused around standing up our workforce plan and also digital equity activities as well. That being said, we've already submitted 3 different documents to NTIA, which is the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is a subset of the Department of Commerce. The first thing that we submitted was back in August, and that was our 5-year action plan, which is available currently on GTA's website for your review. Essentially what this is kind of a high-level overview of the state of broadband in Georgia, and understanding how many unserved locations we have left, looking at our cost modeling to see how far we think we'll be able to go when it's looking to reach all of those locations. And again, just an overview and the strategies of what we're going to deploy so that we're able to make sure that we're focused on getting to our remaining unserved and underserved locations. Then there's the initial proposal volume 1, which is primarily what we're going to talk about today, which mainly details our challenge process. And then initial proposal volume 2 mainly details our grant process, and that is currently something that we're working with NTIA right now on in the curing process. And so we will be doing these webinars later this year once we get closer to an approved volume 2 and detail what our grant plan is going to look like and the timeline for that program. So mainly kind of our very high level timeline for this program has been that in 2023, obviously, it's been very much kind of a planning phase where we've created, these 3 plans. The 5-year action plan and volume 2 are both over 200 pages. Volume 1, which we're talking about here today, is a good bit shorter. But so, it has been a very big effort over the last year to really focus on community engagement, gathering data, and making sure that we are well poised to go ahead and start the work that we are now beginning with actually deploying this program and actually starting our grant process. To talk a little bit more about each of the documents that we have submitted. Again, we've got our 5-year action plan, which is kind of your high-level summary available on our website. We have volume 1 of our initial proposal, which is has been submitted to NTIA. We are done with the curing process. We believe that we will have approval hopefully any day now. That's why we wanted to go and have this webinar to be able to go through any kind of remaining questions, or also just kind of continue to give you an overview about what the challenge process is going to look like. Volume 2, again, we just received curing comments back. Our updated plan is actually being submitted to NTIA for review today. And so we will keep you updated as we have more movement on that plan. And then our final proposal will be submitted either late this year or early next year, and that will actually detail all of the provisional grant awards that the state has made. And then at that point, once we have final approval of our final proposal, we will be able to go ahead and get projects started. That being said, we are talking today primarily about our initial proposal volume 1, which oversees the state challenge process. As was outlined in our initial proposal volume 1, which all of these documents are available currently on GTA's website, which is just gta.ga.gov, and under programs, just click on broadband. But all of the data that we are using to really kind of figure out which locations are unserved and underserved and served throughout the state is all based on the FCC's National Broadband Availability Map. The biggest thing is when you're looking at this, making sure you're applying the right filters, not just looking at, any technology if you're going to the FCC's website, but also making sure you're filtering for only the locations that are have wired or licensed fixed wireless locations. And then you're also looking at the speed filters as well. But that being said, the state is going to be putting lists of all of the different categories of data online for your review. So that way, if you would like to see them kind of at a broader level, you can go to the FCC's website. When we do open the challenge process and we make those lists available, we will also be publishing a map, hopefully to make this process easier for you as well. That being said, we've briefly talked about the lists. They are currently being refreshed, and we will put the new list on GTA's website early next week. The reason why we had to do this was we have run our data in preparation for the challenge process. Unfortunately, the way that the program is designed, we cannot use data based on NTIA rules that is more than 60 days old. And unfortunately, since approval has taken us much longer than expected, that 60-day window has expired. And so we are currently working to rerun the data using a newer data set so that hopefully we will get approval in this 60-day window so that we can go ahead and use this data. As a reminder, The only data that we are allowed based on our contracts that we are allowed to show is the fabric ID number. We did actually get approval from CostQuest that we're going to be able to show a little bit more information, hopefully to make this process easier for you, where it will list the fabric ID number and the county. So hopefully that will make it a little bit of a faster process for you. So that way you can sort by county. And then that way, if there are particular counties that are of interest to you, you're able to isolate that data faster. But the way that you will be able to decipher that data is obviously getting your proper license agreement in place with CostQuest. If you're an internet service provider, that's going to be a tier D license. And if you are a nonprofit or a local government, that's going to be a tier E license. If you currently do not have your CostQuest license in place, we strongly encourage you to go ahead and do that as quickly as possible. We want to make sure that everybody that wants to participate in this process has their CostQuest agreement in place so that you're not waiting to get that in place. And then ultimately, when the 30-day window opens for the challenge process, we don't want anyone to potentially lose time with that just because you don't have your license agreement in place. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at broadband@gta.ga.gov. William on our team is leading this effort and will be happy to help you if you have any questions or need assistance in signing up for the appropriate license for your organization. With that, just to kind of quickly go over just a few kind of policy items that we have made surrounding the challenge process. We have done what's called a pre-challenge modification, which is where NTIA allows the state to put in our initial proposal, volume 1, for their consideration, kind of large groups of locations that we want to reclassify. And so the state in our initial proposal, volume 1, has reclassified any location that is served by DSL will be considered underserved in our data. And any location that is served solely by cellular fixed wireless will be also considered underserved in our data. Also, prior to opening our challenge, and this window has already passed, we allowed for a 30-day pre-challenge data collection so that way, if there were any enforceable funding commitments that we were not aware of at the state level, mainly to do with local fiscal recovery fund, where providers have worked directly with local governments to form agreements to serve those locations. We obviously want to make sure that we are not overbuilding those areas. And so we used that window to try to just continue to gather more data. Again, that window has already closed, but if you missed that window, there is no concern because all of that information can still be submitted during our formal challenge process. This was done in hopes that we would just have the best possible data going into the challenge. And again, based on NTIA's rules, only internet service providers, nonprofits, and local governments and tribal governments are eligible to submit challenges. Individuals are not eligible to submit location level challenges, but obviously you can work with any of the groups I just listed to hopefully submit individual challenges if that's something that you feel is necessary. Quickly kind of walking through our timeline. We began the pre-data challenge or pre-data collection in January. And again, that window has already closed. We have reviewed that data and we have incorporated it in the list that will be coming out shortly. Whenever we receive approval from NTIA on volume 1, which again, fingers crossed, we are hoping is any day now, we are planning to open the challenge process 3 business days following approval. In those 3 business days, obviously, we are going to use kind of any and all forms of communication that we use at GTA to obviously message to all of our interested stakeholders that this process will be opening. We will be using obviously the GTA listserv, the advisory boards that GTA uses. We'll be using our website. We will issue a press release. But you know, we really encourage you to make sure you're watching communication from GTA because we wouldn't want anybody to miss the opening of this window. But again, we will do everything within our power during those 3 days to make sure that everyone is aware that the challenge process will be opening on that particular date. Following the 30-day challenge phase, there will be a rebuttal phase. So for the challenges submitted during the challenge phase, the providers, if they are challenged, will have 30 days to gather data and submit that as a rebuttal if they wish to rebut the locations. It's also fine if a provider does not want to rebut the locations and chooses to concede those locations. There is a process for that in our portal. Following the rebuttal phase, the state will then take 30 days to do final review and adjudications and make final determinations on the challenges submitted. Following this process, we have to submit this data to NTIA. And then at that point, once NTIA approves the outcome of our challenge process and approves that data set, then we'll be able to go ahead and open our grant. We will also be reviewing challenges on a rolling basis. Based on talking to a number of other states that have already started their process, we strongly encourage you for number 2 here, if you are planning to submit a challenge, please do it early. If you submit a challenge early and there is an issue with it, if you are, our portal generally is designed so that you cannot submit a challenge if you're missing information. However, if there is some type of issue with your challenge, if you submit early on, we will be able to review that and hopefully work with you to supply the missing data. The closer we get to the end of the 30-day challenge window, as we have heard from other states, we do expect volume to greatly increase. And the closer you get to the deadline, we might not be able to do that same type of review and get back to you and help you cure anything if it is missing anything. So please submit your challenges early to give yourself the best opportunity to work with us if there's anything that we still need or it's missing. If you submit on day 29 or day 30, more than likely whatever you submit will have to be your final submission, because based on time and volume, we will not have the bandwidth to work through it the way that we will the early challenges. Also working with the providers on the rebuttal phase. We have heard from other states that there are just generally some best practices of, certainly we want to be careful with PII, and certainly want to make sure that the data that needs to remain confidential does throughout this process, as we've outlined in volume 1. We are committed to doing that. However, for example, if you are trying to rebut a challenge, but you submit data that redacts the served location or the address of the served location, there's really no way that our team can review that and make a final determination if we don't have the sufficient data supplied in order to actually tie that to a particular location. So the better data that we can get, both in the challenge phase and the rebuttal phase, makes it much easier for us to make a final determination. And so with that, we also will be doing this on a rolling basis. And so the faster that we get challenges in, the faster we can send them to providers to review and hopefully supply information if they wish to rebut or not. And then we can make final determinations. And so our hope is that it certainly does not take us any longer than 30 days to make final determinations. And it is our hope that we actually get through this faster. That being said, just wanted to quickly walk you through the types of challenges and show you kind of quickly what the portal looks like. We have received a number of questions about if the portal is currently open or if you can go ahead and register. We have not published that yet, and we will plan in the window when we have been approved. In that 3-day window before we open the challenge, we'll go ahead and make the portal live so you can go ahead and register. But as of right now, we still are holding that since we are not approved. That being said, we'll run through the types of challenges. Hopefully you're familiar with these. These have been outlined in our volume 1 and also in NTIA's model challenge language. But the types of challenges will be for availability, speed tests, latency, data caps, technology, business service only, enforceable commitments, plan service. It's not part of an enforceable commitment, the location is a CAI, or the location is not a CAI. And I'll quickly run through in a little bit more detail what each of those mean. The main type of challenge, obviously, that we're expecting, other than planned service, is an availability challenge. So essentially, through kind of the proof that's described here, this is where, an ISP can challenge another ISP, a nonprofit can challenge an ISP, a local government could challenge an ISP. Essentially, that the situation that if the ISP is telling the FCC in their map that they can serve a location, and another ISP or a local government or a nonprofit can essentially prove that that is not the case. Whether that's, a letter or email dated from the last 180 days where the provider is declining to provide service. If the service that the provider is suggesting to provide costs more than a standard install fee. If there is evidence that there's a lack of infrastructure in the area, any type of service request from the provider that's refused, provider website screenshots, pretty self-explanatory. Certainly happy to answer any questions on that. But again, we do think that this is going to be one of the main challenge types of obviously challenging that availability is not in a location that is being reported to the FCC. Next, speed test. So we are only accepting speed tests for locations that are served by fixed wireless. And the details on how to submit a speed test challenge are detailed in our volume 1. We did follow NTIA's model language of the process and procedure that you need to follow about taking multiple speed tests, taking them at different times on different days, in order to really kind of show the kind of bandwidth or lack thereof of the network. And so more details are listed on our website to tell you exactly how you can participate in the speed test challenge if you'd like to do that. Same thing for latency tests. We will only be accepting those for fixed wireless. And that is all detailed in volume 1 as well. Of essentially the process will be the same as a speed test of how you would conduct those tests. Data caps. So essentially, if you can prove that the provider that solely provides service at a location imposes an unreasonable data cap, that is another reason to challenge. Technology. Essentially, this type of challenge is if the technology type that is listed in the FCC map is incorrect. So if it lists cable in the map, but it's actually fixed wireless, or if it lists fixed wireless and it's actually fiber, this gives you the opportunity to get that amended in our data if their type of technology that's being reported to the FCC is incorrect. Business service only can also be challenged. So if a business, essentially, if a location within the FCC map is listed that it's served, but the provider only provides business service, you can challenge that, the fact that they do not provide residential service. We mainly took care, hopefully, of the enforceable commitments during our pre-challenge data collection. However, if there are any other enforceable commitments that you would like to have us be aware of, when we mean enforceable commitment, we mean a state, local, or federal funding commitment to survey location, and there's a grant agreement or some type of contract that you can produce to show us that there is a binding agreement to serve that location and fund it. The other type of challenge that we are expecting to primarily receive is for planned service. So if you have an enforceable funding commitment challenge, that again is going to be that, you have an agreement with some, form of government that you're getting grant money to serve that location, or you're getting a loan. However, if you are going to these locations using your own private capital, you would instead file a planned service challenge. So essentially, that's where you're planning to go using your own funding, and that you plan to have those locations done no later than December 31st of 2025, then you can file a planned service challenge. In order to do this, you will have to provide evidence. So it can't just be that you plan to go there in the future, but you have no evidence to show for that. There needs to be construction agreements, permits, network design. Again, there needs to be proof to the point that the state is comfortable with, that you will have this built and that you are already kind of actively engaged in this process to have these locations built by the end of 2025. If the state does decide to uphold your plan service challenge submitted, you will need to sign an MOU with the state to confirm that you will be serving those locations. Just as we had previously with the enforceable funding commitments, if you believe that there is a location that is incorrectly tied to a funding commitment, then you can file and say that it's actually not part of an enforceable funding commitment. So you can file that type of challenge. And then the last two types of challenges that you can file is we will be providing our list of community anchor institutions. And so it goes both ways of if there's a location that is within the data sets that we provide, but it's not listed as a community anchor institution that also supports broadband in its local community, then you can file a challenge that is in fact a community anchor institution for these purposes, and that we need to add that into our data set. Or if there's also a location that we have identified as a community anchor institution, and you believe that it should not be, and that it does not meet our definition as defined in volume 1, then you can file a challenge that is not a community anchor institution. The other final type of challenge is an area or MDU challenge. So the thought on this is more so, and again, this is template language from NTIA of, if rather than kind of these kind of one-off challenges for individual locations, essentially an area challenge is triggered if 6 or more BSLs, broadband serviceable locations, using a particular type of technology from the same provider within a census block group get challenged. So essentially it's a way to show of if there's an issue or there appears to be an issue in a community looking at census block groups that we're able to kind of hone in and see, okay, well, if 6 locations for this one type of technology for the same provider are being challenged, is that area really challenged or not, rather than looking at those individual locations. And then also looking at MDUs as well, of looking at either 3 units or 10% of the count, whichever is higher, to make sure if an MDU is properly being reflected in our data. Quickly, we will just show you kind of what the landing page looks like and registering for the portal. And then with that, if you'll use, we have tried to unlock the chat, but I think that is giving us a bit of technical trouble. So if we'll just use the Q&A, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you have. So the front of the portal, the landing page of the portal will look like the screen that you're seeing right now. And then what you will do of kind of how you're going to submit a challenge is you have to create an account. Once you've been approved, then you can start submitting challenges through our portal. We will be working obviously very quickly on the back end to make sure we get everyone approved quickly. And again, we will go ahead and open this as soon as we get approval from NTIA on volume 1, so that you can go ahead and start signing up as an approved user in that 3 business day window before the challenge process opens, so that when we actually do open the challenge portal beyond just registration, that you can go ahead and start submitting challenges. And again, you must submit a challenge through the portal. But with that, just want to go ahead and we will make this presentation and also this webinar available on our website if you want to go back and reference it. But again, we have the available links to obviously our landing page on our GTA website, our initial proposal volume 1 and volume 2 as submitted to NTIA. Hopefully very soon we'll be swapping out the initial proposal volume 1 with an approved initial proposal volume 1 that will be our final version of that. Also our 5-year action plan and our digital connectivity plan, which is currently being updated and resubmitted to NTIA with a few very minor edits. And then at that point, hopefully we'll also have an approved digital connectivity plan to start implementing as well. With that, also just want to make sure that you have my contact information. Obviously, the best way to reach out to me or the team, please feel free to email, call, text. This is my cell phone number, so please also feel free to text if you would like. All of our contact information is available on our website. And then if you would like to get to any of us on the team, or generally maybe the quickest answer, if you'll email broadband@gta.ga.gov, that goes to all of us on the team. And that is a box that we monitor very closely, so that one of us will always answer that. So that will probably be the fastest response. But with that, I want to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and go ahead and see if there are any questions. If you want to go ahead and put those in the Q&A box, we can go ahead and answer those. And then again, following this, we will put this webinar on our website for your review, and then also a set of our slides. I think the biggest takeaway on this is just that we are really hoping to have robust participation in this process. It's really critical that we have a lot of involvement and engagement in the challenge process. If you feel that there are any locations that need to be updated in the data set before we open the grant. This essentially is our final opportunity to comb through the data and make sure that we have the best possible and most accurate data as we lead into the grant process. Following this process, we are not going to be able to, add any additional locations. The only thing that we're going to be able to do is, aside from the challenge process, as between essentially before we run our grant, we're able to kind of do one final true up to any new FCC data. And again, just doing kind of a final check on deduplication based on enforceable funding commitments. But that being said, we'll go ahead and switch over now to the Q&A. And let's see what we've got. It looks like the first question is, must we submit a challenge for any locations that have been built since the last refresh? And if so, what type of challenge would that be? So what I would say is, first, what you need to do is make sure, look in the data set that we post on our website. If it is not properly being shown in the right category, so essentially if it's still being shown in the unserved or underserved category, you can file an availability challenge. Essentially, you could say that service is available at that location. Or again, I think that we also have the flexibility if you want to. I think it's best put into the availability category for that particular one. But what I would strongly encourage you to do is first look at our data set, make sure that it is not properly being reflected in the data, but then do file that challenge, because again, the reason why the challenge process takes place is because, based on how both the state's mapping effort is done and obviously the FCC's mapping effort is done, providers are obviously not submitting data to the FCC on a real-time basis. And so this challenge process is really our last opportunity to update our data before we run the grant. And so it is really important that if you have locations that you have built to since you last submitted data to the FCC, it is critical to make sure that you do submit those during this process so that we take those out of eligibility. Let's see. The next question is, what are the essential requirements for nonprofits to apply for a Tier E license? I will turn that over to William on our team in just a minute, but in general, it's my understanding that CostQuest is being very flexible with groups regarding the Tier E license agreement. I did want to highlight that based on the agreement that NTIA has in place, the licensing through CostQuest for both the state, for ISPs for this usage, and also local governments and nonprofits, the license agreements are are free. And so it's a no cost agreement to any of the groups that do wish to get this data. Essentially, you're just signing the agreement that that this is proprietary information, that it contains their intellectual property, and that you will not distribute it in any type of manner beyond how it's specified in the agreement. That's why when we are putting this data on our website, we can only share very limited information rather than being able to publish the full data set. But with that, you know, they are being very flexible based on the nonprofits that they are approving. I will say, and William can also jump in here as well. We do know that we have a number of providers that do have Tier D agreements in place. We do not have very many people that have signed up for Tier E licenses. And so with that, you know, we strongly encourage any, you know, local governments or nonprofits to go ahead and sign up for your Tier E license if you're planning to participate. Just because we regularly talk with CostQuest to monitor to see kind of how many agreements we have in place, and and we don't have a lot of them yet. And so we're really encouraging you to make sure that you sign up for those agreements if you're interested. I was going to say the link just got dropped as well in the chat related to the process. But again, you know, broadband@gta.ga.gov. Our team will walk you through the process. And if you have any issues getting that agreement, let us know. And we will certainly help you, because again, I think for those that have already signed the agreements, it's a very straightforward process where, again, it's free. It's just simply that the agreement has to be in place because of intellectual property, and that CostQuest just wants to make sure that their information is protected and not distributed in a manner that violates the agreement.
Yeah, and we only currently have 6 entities that have Tier E agreements. And so definitely want to have one of those in place if you plan on participating in the challenge process at all.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions? So there is not a chat. The chat is still disabled, but if you have any other, if you have questions, please feel free to drop that in the Q&A. When you mentioned you're not seeing the chat, up at the top, if you're able to click on, it should say open, answered, or dismissed. If you can click on the answered tab, that should show you the information related to the link for CostQuest licensing and also William's email address. If y'all can't see that, let us know. Again, I apologize for our Zoom technical issues this morning. But are there any other questions related to the challenge process, CostQuest licenses, anything in volume 1 that you might want to have answered? You know, again, we can't stress enough how important it is to participate in this process, because this is going to be the data set that we have going into the grant. And so it's really critical that we go into the grant with the best possible data, so that when the grant does open up, then, and we're looking at eligible locations and providers are bidding on those, that we really make sure that we are able to extend coverage as far as we possibly can throughout the state. And this is really the first step in this process of making sure that we have the eligible locations right before we go into that process. I'll give it just another minute. Are there any other questions that anybody has? If you have a question, just drop it in the Q&A for us.
There was Jessica, one question says, does an independent telephone company need to have a Tier E license? I believe so. ISPs, which include independent telephone companies, need a Tier D license, whereas our nonprofits need a Tier E license.
Perfect. Are there any other questions?
We do have one person with their hand raised. Loretta Hilton.
Sarah, are you allowed, or are you able to, let's see.
You're in the host mode. So you
Okay,
can
let's see.
yeah.
Okay, Loretta, I think you should be able to go ahead and ask your question. I apologize, Loretta, we can't hear you. Oh, no worries. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and give everybody a couple minutes back. We just wanted to have one more opportunity, hopefully before our challenge process opens and initial proposal volume 1 gets approved, to be able to answer any questions, walk through the challenge process with you. Again, there's a lot of information on our website at gta.ga.gov. All of the details that we discussed today related to the process and the procedure of the challenge process are very clearly detailed in our initial proposal volume 1 on our website. And so I strongly encourage you to have a chance to read through that before the challenge process opens. That is our shortest document that we have produced. So it is, of all of the documents, it's a quick read just to make sure that you kind of fully understand the process and kind of how we've gotten the data. And obviously, you know, if you're interested in certain things like speed tests or area challenges, kind of how those look a little bit different from other types of challenges, please review that. But again, as always, please feel free to reach out to us. We want this to be a very kind of a robust process. We want people to participate. We have tried to make it as easy as possible through our portal for people to participate. Having a portal and using our portal to accept challenges was an NTIA requirement. However, we have tried to make the portal as user-friendly as possible. If you're experiencing any issues using the portal, please let us know. We'll be happy to walk you through that. Or if there's a tweak or a suggestion that you might have to make the process easier, you know, we do have flexibility since the state and our partners at Carl Vinson developed the portal for us. You know, we are able to amend that very quickly if there's an issue. With that, if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and give everyone a few minutes back. Thank you so much for joining us, and we really hope that you'll help us with this process and participate in our challenge and help us have the best possible data set going into our grant program. But with that, I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your participation. Thank you.